Right, Serghei Spivac versus Marcin Tybura. First of all, this card was a mess. This was like the most rushed card in history. Look at the amount of decisions we had on that card. But anyways, I thought this fight would have lasted longer than a round. But Serghei Spivac, his jiu-jitsu is something else, because one thing I'll say about him, a lot of his submissions come from him taking his opponent down and then putting their opponent in a vulnerable situation so we can get that like arm triangle like he did to Derek Lewis, or even look to ground and pound them. I didn't think him to have the jiu-jitsu of a guy who's on their back and pulls up like an armbar like he's Charles Oliveira. The amount of flexibility he had to have, bearing in mind that he is a heavyweight, is ridiculous. When do you see an armbar from a heavyweight? The type of submissions you see from them are the ones when they're on top. It's so rare to see someone like him on the bottom pulling it off. Even though he's got good jiu-jitsu, you just don't see it. And for Tybura, he's old. I should have seen it coming. You're not going to believe me, but as the fight kept getting closer, I was starting to think, Spivac should win this. Everything's in his favour now. He's not as small as he used to be. He's younger. His boxing actually looked better than Tybura in the earlier round, because when the fight started, Tybura, he looked a bit slow. He didn't get rocked by any punches, but he didn't look sharp. And that's the age there. His reactions are worse. So yeah, he had that good win over Tai Tuivasa, but I guarantee you, if you give him one of the good grapplers who aren't ranked in heavyweight, they might have a chance against Tai Tuivasa if they shoot at him. Like, Tai Tuivasa is your stereotypical pub brawler. He's not like a technical fighter. He's not a guy with jiu-jitsu. He's the type of guy you would see in a pub who can just swing hard and knock you out. That's all he relies on. If that don't work, he's done. And Tybura was able to submit him, but then when he comes up against a technical Serghei Spivac on the ground, gets caught in an armbar. And for me, that was just probably one of the best things that happened on this card, that submission. But obviously, we had a comeback earlier, so we'll move on to the next one. So for Serghei Spivac, who do I want to see him fight next? He wants to fight someone higher up. I don't know why. Maybe because most of the spots are occupied. But I wanted to see him against Romanov, but because they're both from the same nationality, you know what happens. They don't want to fight each other. And I believe they're probably friends, especially if you're from Moldova. There's barely any Moldovans in the UFC. I believe they might be the only two. So, in the same weight class. And I don't think Romanov's in the rankings still. He might be. But I don't think they'll want to fight each other. So, we're going to have to go even lower down. So, maybe Marco Salima, or because Waldo Cortez Acosta's on a good winning run, he just beat Despaigne, wouldn't it make sense to do Waldo Cortez Acosta against him? I think that would be interesting. Because I still believe he's a fraud. I know he's got like these good wins on his record, you might think, with Andrei Arlovski, Robalista Despaigne. Okay, I'm not going to say that's a good win, but Andrei Arlovski is. He's frauding his way through the division. He's getting the easy fights. He's having controversial decisions with Arlovski. Robalista Despaigne, he can't grapple. He pretty much exposed that. He didn't want to strike with him because he was scared. And I believe against a guy like Spivac, you can't like fluke your way against him because he hasn't got power. So how is he going to beat that guy? Yeah, he beat Brzezinski, but that guy's a glass straw at heavyweight. So I'm not counting that as an impressive knockout win, because most people could knock him out at heavyweight. Even Zach Pauga, when he was at heavyweight, I wouldn't be surprised if he did it, and he's small. And for Tybura, he's getting older now. So maybe let's do him against Shamil Gaziev. Just coming off that win against Dante Almeida, but I think it's going to be hard to just hug him on the floor. We've got to remember, I believe when he got taken down against Serghei Spivac, look at how he was able to reverse the position. You have to be careful against Gaziev because he's kind of fat. I literally saw a comment with people pretty much saying his stomach has his own heartbeat. Dangerous on the ground, and even on the feet, this Tybura is much more slow. Gaziev's very hittable. It makes a good matchup for me. Chepe Mariscal versus Damon Jackson. This fight was quite entertaining. Nah, it wasn't. Why am I lying to myself? This fight here, it was a weird one. It was a very I'm sorry, I'm disappointed by Mariscal because he should have got the finish there. He looked so gassed because he's just clinching, he's setting a high pace. But Damon Jackson pretty much looked like he was dead on the floor multiple times. And you'll see him Mariscal pretty much just tapping with these light punches on the head. And his coaches are saying, throw punches, throw punches. The guy's not even concussed Mariscal. And he's just like lying on top of him because of exhaustion. And I think he just gasses himself out way too much. Like, really? The knockout was there. I don't know why he didn't just want to try and strike with him. He didn't even need to grapple with Damon Jackson. Because every time they'd enter an exchange, which probably happened only 2 or 3 times, he would get the better of him, kneeing him to the body against the cage. Damon Jackson, all he tried to do is pretty much get cable grip with his hands and reverse his back against the cage and hug him pretty much. There was no offensive moves by him. The only offensive thing you could say was the guillotine. That was it, like jumping onto it once, but because Mariscal had a good head position, he didn't leave his head too exposed too much because his coaches did some good work telling him what to do. He just looked dead out there. He had no, don't even know what word to use, business being out there, whereas Mariscal, he just schooled him at his own game. And Chepe Mariscal, yes, we know he likes to clinch, but he also can strike out of range, and that's what I thought he'd do more of, but he didn't, but at least he got the win. In what world are you giving a 30-27 Nikolai? I don't know what that guy was seeing. Nikolai, he grew into the fight in the 3rd round, but in the 2nd round, he just looked too scared to strike. Like, how are you giving the guy who looked too scared to strike? Yes, Barlow did as well, but at least he had a bit more output in the first 2 rounds. How the hell are you giving that guy all 3 rounds? Some judges need to have their brain tested after, like, he's not a fighter to my knowledge, so he probably don't have CTE. But what he does have is a low IQ. Because no one in their right mind would have given that guy a 30-27. It's physically not possible. That guy could not have won every round. Even if you didn't want to just use that, you could look off the stats alone. If you looked at the stats, nothing would show you that that's a 30-27. So I'm confused. I don't know what to say about that judge. That judge is probably losing his job after this card anyway. We're probably going to get an investigation to why he's done that. Wow, Quang Lee versus Chris Gutierrez. You know what? That was a shocking performance by Chris Gutierrez. And you know why? I've started to notice with him, he can struggle against guys who really put pressure on him and look to fire off their backhand aggressively. In that Song Yadong fight, he doesn't like dealing with explosive fighters. And yes, he won the fight here, but that's because of a lack of experience. I'm starting to think now, if this guy had a full camp, there's a good chance he could have beaten Gutierrez, because Gutierrez, although he stopped some of the takedowns, you could see that at times his back can be taken quite easily. When you can get him down at once, he doesn't always spring back up to his feet, and he's quite easy to control at times. So yes, he might have been able to get up and stop the takedowns today, but I'm talking about if this guy had a full training camp, he might have actually beaten him, because his takedowns weren't that great. He was shooting out of range instead of using the cage predominantly to just get the takedowns, and that's what he usually does. Like, if you watch his other fights, he will clinch against the cage and try and get the takedown. And Chris Gutierrez has struggled with grapplers earlier on in fights. Yeah, he can come back because he's got the style of the low leg kick. It's very boring watching him. Like, you don't see any of these flashy finishes, which not all fighters have to do. You can be good and exciting without getting a finish, but he doesn't fight in an exciting way. Like, watching him is like watching some of the women fights on the card, which are really boring to watch. Like, low leg kick, no punches, circle out. Fight like Israel Adesanya does nowadays. Boring. So I wouldn't actually give him a good opponent next in terms of high in the rankings because of that fight. Absolutely not. That fight was a disgrace. Well, it weren't, but he came in as a heavy favourite. That was embarrassing, honestly. So I would give him Cody Garbrandt. That is a weird matchup for him because he will get backed up against the cage. I believe Cody Garbrandt's striking is way better than his. Chris Gutierrez, all he has is kicks. He doesn't mix up anything else. And Cody Garbrandt doesn't have to worry about getting knocked out because he's just going to try and chew up your leg. That's all he will try and do. So if he can close the distance, which I think he can with his striking, because his striking hasn't fell off. It was his chin that fell off, and the over-aggressiveness, his mentality in the fight, which cost him the loss. The striking hasn't gone. So I believe that's the fight we make next. I think we should do Quang Lee against Jesse Butler next. Jesse Butler, he has looked bad in both of the performances. Jim Miller just getting starched in seconds. Brad Katona just bullying him with the grappling. The only good thing he's got about him is maybe a triangle choke, which even then he'll struggle to land. So if you give him Quang Lee, I believe, can push him back with the punches, potentially get a knockout. But then again, if he messes about on the ground, I've seen times where if you can keep shooting on Quang Lee, you can get him down. There's one fight, it's on the Fight Pass, where he kept getting taken down and he somehow got a rubbery win after doing no damage. It didn't make any sense. And I believe Jesse Butler, it's a matchup which I believe Quang Lee should win, but he can be exploited through the jiu-jitsu. Like, even Chris Gutierrez tried to get a submission. Obviously, he was never getting it, but if that's Butler in that situation, there's a chance that could have happened. And this guy will like to grapple heavily as well, so it's actually a decent matchup for Butler as well as a decent matchup for Quang Lee. Toshiomi Kazama versus Charalampas Diagru. Oh my god. This fight here, I don't know if any fight of the nights have been given, but that fight was fight of the night. Charalampas Grigoriou, no cardio. He is very embarrassing when I watch him in terms of he's got power in the first round, but as soon as the first round ends, it's like the gas tank is gone. He now doesn't know what to do. And Kazama, on the other hand, he fought like his job was on the line, which it probably was, by immediately not wasting any time like a lot of grapplers do, which we'll go into later, and just immediately shoot in on him and look to take the back. He's trying. He gets the back, but he just can't maintain like a extremely good position where he's going to get the rear naked choke. And as soon as he is going to get it, what happens? Scrambling. And then you see he's all over him for that round. Like, this guy here, out of his depth on the ground. Like, he can't grapple. He really can't. It's poor, low-level amateur. Then the round ends, and I'm immediately thinking, right, the round's ended. Kazama's a glass jaw. Grigoriou, he has power, but I'm thinking it's probably going to diminish. But deep down, you know that power's the last thing to go. So what happens? He comes out the next round, knocks him down, and you're all thinking, right, he's knocked him down, the fight's about to be over. Chael Sonnen against Anderson Silva moment. He's knocked him down, he's hitting him with elbows, but because he's so gassed, he's so lazy, he couldn't be asked to get off the floor, and instead what happens? You've allowed Kazama to pretty much tie up that triangle, and whilst he's trying to like adjust and get that triangle, Grigoriou is pretty much accepting the position. You weren't really seeing him really trying to defend. He was so tired, he probably just tapped because of exhaustion with the choke as well. So imagine being put in that choke whilst you're tired. He's just like, let me just throw in the towel and end the fight. That's how it felt. So this Grigoriou guy is really cooked because Kazama's not been great. Like, look at his chin, it's really bad. Most strikers with power will knock him out. Like, it's so bad. So I wish this fight could happen, but it never would. Like, a Weston Wilson and a Kazama would be the perfect fight. They're both memes. They've both got weak chins. But they've both got good jiu-jitsu. So in a weird way, if you put them on a prelim on a card, as dumb as it sounds, they would put on an entertaining fight because of all the scrambling and the jiu-jitsu. It'd be a low-level fight, but because they're like contrasting styles in terms of they're very similar, it would create a good fight. But they'll, of course, not do that because he ain't going to move up the weight class and the UFC would never book that. So instead, we're going to have to look at different opponents. So for Kazama, he saved this contract in the UFC. Who do I want to see him fight next? Yanis Gamori. You know that guy Peyton Talbot KO'd? And you know the guy that William Gomez got that kick? And he complained about it being low, I believe, and then the referee stopped the fight. Probably was Mark Goddard, I can't even remember. That's the type of fight to me because Yanis Gamori, He has good kickboxing. He can do a bit of grappling, so I think Kazama's shooting in like that. Gomori can hold his own, but where the problem will come is there is a chance of Gomori getting the KO on the feet because Kazama's got no chin. Like, it doesn't matter how good you are. If you've got no chin, you've got no chin. If you get touched on that chin, you're going down. It doesn't matter how good your grappling is. But then on the flip side, if Kazama shoots in immediately like he did today and starts applying the pressure, Gomori might do well at defending it. But you can see, I don't think his cardio's bad. I don't think cardio's the issue. I think it's just his chin, because you were seeing he was really working for that submission in the first round. And the fact that he got dropped and he was concussed probably and he still got that choke, it shows you like his endurance is not bad. And I believe Gomori, 2-fight losing streak. Kazama's now on a 1 fight, but he's not really been that good in the UFC so far. Perfect fight to me. And for Grigoriou, I think I'll give him another opponent, but he's out of the UFC. Because you can't just have 1 round cardio and be like that. You just can't. It just won't work. So I'll give him a Dan Argueta. Because yes, he's going to work him with the grappling, but he was on a losing streak. He probably needs to win, and it'll probably get this guy out of the UFC as quick as possible. Right, here's the fight which makes me question IQ. Jhonata Diniz versus Karl Williams. Oh my god. Right, work this out. Well, don't work it out. Explain to me why a guy, I believe he might have been in Glory, he fought Rico van Herven, who is known to be a very strong kickboxer. Karl Williams, who is a grappler, decides, I'm going to try and outstrike this guy who's knocking everyone out, when I've never done that in my career. And when I've tried to strike, it's actually gone quite wrong. Against, I believe, Chase Sherman in the 3rd round, he was struggling. Or if it weren't Chase Sherman, it was someone in the 3rd round. And what happens again? He gets dropped. He's got a good chin, because this guy hits hard. Look what he did to Austin Lane, flattened him out properly. But he couldn't knock out Williams. But he just beat him up on the feet, and he isn't one of these boring, like, heavyweights who just, his striking's very bad, but because he's a heavyweight, he can knock people out. No, it's technical. Hitting you with those low leg kicks that were chewing up his leg, probably making it even harder for him to shoot. And it made me question, why did Karl Williams not want to go for takedowns? Is he scared that being boring will get you cut? Because you will look more boring getting flattened like that than going out there and looking to take him down and ground and pound, because the guy's got good takedown defense, fair enough. But he can be taken down. You did it in the 3rd round. Like, his wrestling is good enough to take down this guy, despite the takedown defense. And of course he does it in the 3rd round. I've seen it multiple times with fighters. And this is why I say I just don't rate some fighters. The IQ needs to be sorted out. Because you're trying to box with a guy who's got a completely different style to you, which is suited to you because you can now take him down because he's a striker. It's not like a guy who's a wrestler who's going to really test you and make you really work for those takedowns. Yeah, it's not going to be a walk in the park, but it's possible. But because this guy, I don't know, does he fear getting cut now looking at what happened to Mikhaev? So all of a sudden he decides to try and strike and just make himself look foolish. And that's what happened. He looked foolish on the feet. He did not know what to do. He used the same combination. It was like a jab, stiff jab, and that was it. There was no backhand strike, whereas you got Diniz, who's kind of like faking that left hook and then hitting you with the overhand. He knows how to strike, and that's the problem with this guy. He doesn't know how to strike, Williams, but he's not going for enough takedowns. So he bottled that fight. It was a very winnable fight for him, but because of IQ again, he lost. And then finally, so who do I want to see him fight next? Diniz? He looks like he will be in the rankings eventually. His striking's just too good for it not to be. As long as he doesn't come up against an extremely high-level grappler, he'll be fine. So, I think because he's beaten Karl Williams, who did not test him in the grappling whatsoever, I would look at a fight with Martin Bude. I know that's a very hard step up, because this guy is one guy who, he won't mess about on the feet like Karl Williams. He won't be scared about, oh, I might get cut. He will go for the takedowns. And if you beat a guy like Martin Bude, that will show me that he's ready to fight a ranked opponent, because Bude, he lost to Gaziev because he just got walked down with punches. But Gaziev can grapple. So shooting in on him, it's not as simple as like shooting in on a striker. Whereas on this guy here, shooting in, he doesn't have anything to worry about apart from the fact that this guy's got good takedown defense. He isn't going to jump onto a guillotine. He isn't going to reverse him and then land ground and pound. He's going to try and separate and fight at range and do what he wants to do. So I believe Buday's a good match to do, like a good matchup for him, because his striking is really poor. And if you can catch him clean on the chin, he can be TKO'd. But if you allow him to get too close to the point where he's in clinch range, you're in trouble, because like I said, he fights a bit like Tyson Fury. Nowhere near as good, but like with the dirty boxing and then hugging onto you, clinching, it can be quite boring. But because Diniz is a guy who he will like to exchange in the pocket, especially with that hook, you're not going to be allowed to be boring. So we'll do him against Parkin. And for Karl Williams, it's unfortunate because I thought he was one fight away from being ranked. And maybe this win here would have gotten him a ranked opponent. So, who would I like to see him fight next? Mohammed Usman. I think that's a good matchup to make because this guy knows how to defend takedowns. He can box, but the only problem with him is low IQ. At times you can try and get involved in a brawl when he doesn't really need to, and then that allows him to be hit on the chin a lot. But then again, Karl Williams really should be looking for the takedowns, but this is a guy who will test you and will try and defend against them. So I don't think it'll be a walk in the park for him. So that's what I'd do next. Youssef Zalal versus Jarno Errens. You know what? I underrated Errens. I know he didn't win, but he looked like the better striker. And I'm starting to believe Zalal's striking really isn't that good. He looked good against Quarantilla, which is weird, but Errens, what's his name? Errens' strike is improving a lot. Starting to see him being more aggressive, leg kick, pressure forward, catches Zalal with some shots which make him back up against the wall. But you saw Zalal was kind of getting frustrated with the striking. So he's like, you know what, I can't be asked with this anymore. Just shoot in on him and take the back. That's what he does. As soon as you see him get that takedown or get control of his opponent in the clinch where he's about to take the back, fight done, because his jiu-jitsu is really good. And what happened? Submitted. So again, it was a shaky start, but because he's got good jiu-jitsu, that will save him in a lot of fights. So at featherweight, I want him to fight kind of against a guy with good jiu-jitsu defense. But then again, I'm at the point with him where I believe he's one fight away from getting a ranked opponent. So, I don't know if he called him out. I might be dreaming or something, but Dan Ige, that'd be interesting. And I believe he might be like number 15 ranked, so I might have contradicted myself. But yeah, we should do him against Dan Ige. I think that's an interesting fight. Very good takedown defense. I don't think Dan Ige's been submitted before or knocked out. I might be wrong, but I don't think he has. So if your striking isn't going well, he hasn't. There's no get out route. You have to outstrike him because you're going to struggle to like catch him with a choke. Diego Lopez couldn't do it. We all know how good his jiu-jitsu is. He's finishing like some good guys. Like, I don't think he'll submit him, but what he might do is make him work hard for the finish, because Zalal's got a very good chin and he can make a fight very like frustrating because you hit him with a good shot, he doesn't go down. He might then shoot him for your legs and then you're now on the ground and now you've got to work hard to get back up again. So I think that's a competitive matchup to do. So yeah, Jarno Errens, again, I don't think he's UFC level. If what's his name? If Cub Swanson hasn't retired, honestly, I would look at that fight with him because that would be actually an entertaining fight to see, because Jarno Errens, he's light on the feet, a bit like Cub Swanson. He's active on the feet, a bit like Cub Swanson. He doesn't have his hands down, but he fights in a way where he's not too defensive. He's very offensive. Cub Swanson, very offensive as well, hands down, good footwork. That's the type of fight which would be on a good prelim. So, yeah, I'd do that. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Talk to you soon.